Hello and welcome to Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women. I am Kathy Pollard, and with me is your other host, Carla Moore. And we want to thank you for joining us. We're so thankful for those of you who are watching, those of you who are listening. It means a lot to us, and we hope that we'll have good conversation together and to remind all of us to keep looking up and know that no matter what's going on in the world, everything's going to be okay for those who are following Christ. We have an extra special episode for today because we have special guests joining us today. We have Neal Pollard and John Moore, and we've all been cruising and visiting Bible lands together, and we're going to have good conversation about all kinds of things. We have not told them ahead of time what we're going to ask them or what we're going to talk about. So I know it's going to be very interesting, but we thank you guys. Yeah. We thank you guys for joining us and for being willing to do this. And we've talked about this for a while, actually, the idea of doing one together. Yeah. So I'm glad that this worked out so that we could do it. So
it's a captive audience. Since we're on a ship. They can't get away from us.
Us or them. Okay.
Yeah. You are in the hot seat. Are you ready?
Probably not.
Probably not. All right, Carla, you've actually come up with some ideas of things we'll talk about with them, but before we get into that, we thought we would update you a little bit. We've talked about the cruise in the past couple of episodes, so we won't take too long with that, but update you a little bit on what we've been doing the past couple of days since the last time we recorded. What are you guys, what are your impressions about our trip and what we've been doing?
Well, I want to say this because I know that John and Carla won't, but they...
Nervous.
This has been, well, it's been so smooth, and everything that you would want out of a trip but wouldn't anticipate were things that were taken care of. And I just think it's so impressive that this is a ministry. You know, it's not something you do for profit, but you do it so well. And we've been at the back of the line, so we get to hear the buzz from people behind, and they've been so pleased, and I think that they have enjoyed every stop, even though we had some unexpected changes at the last minute. So.
Thank you. That's sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been one of the most, exciting things about this trip is that given all the obstacles like you were talking about, to see how God has blessed us and that it was about the relationships in the end. Got to see a lot of neat things, but to see how God worked among everyone. And of course, we shouldn't be surprised whenever Christians get together. You know, there's going to be a lot of joy and just the way that people helped each other out. And then naturally we learned a lot of things along the way that fortified our faith.
So we recorded on Saturday, right? And that was the day we were on Crete. And so y'all went out. What did you do that day? You did something.
Yeah.
You rented a vehicle or something?
Well, we started off. We got on the shuttle, headed over to the museum, and which none of us had been. I'd been to a museum years ago there, and this was a new one. So we figured out how to get there. 27-minute walk once we got off the shuttle, and then we did a little detour to...
Well, I got to walk in the Mediterranean.
You did.
I heard you did a little more than walking in the Mediterranean.
I should have taken off my shoes first.
Well, a little waiting, huh?
That's what happens when you explore, right?
That's right.
Little things like
That's
that
right.
happen.
I picked up rocks I had to give back to the people at Royal when I got home.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just walked. It's a great museum. I think they were able to do a whole lot more in this expanded location. They just moved. Is it months or just a little over a year ago?
Yeah, about a year, I think, yeah. But about the Minoan, Mycenaean civilization and kind of the early inhabitants of that island as the forerunners to the Greek civilization. So that was interesting. And so while we're there, this was what was so funny is that Neal read something on one of the little,
at the
exhibits,
museum.
At the museum was one of the exhibits, and he comes and goes, "Have you ever heard of this place?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, you tell him what you saw."
Well, it was Aptera, and they were still ruins, and so I don't know. We just thought, well, it'd be neat to go over there, and so John said, "Well, see if you can find a way for us to get over there." And so there's a real helpful guy at the front desk. We wore him out, and he called a taxi service, and found out. In fact, we got a minibus to come, and it wound up being 10 of us.
Yeah, I think so.
And to rent this minibus for 2 hours was 140 euros, which I'm thinking, wow, he's going to stay with us. And he turned out to be pretty helpful and told us about different things. But I'm sitting up there in the front thinking, maybe this is 140 euros
Per
a person.
Yikes.
And so I'm praying all along the way, Lord, please let me not have just made a nightmare of this. But he was the nicest guy. Panos, or I can't remember now what his name was. But we talked the whole time. Went out there, and it was I guess some of the rooms were 4th century BC. There was a gate. And then most of it was Roman era. There were baths. And John found the underground cisterns. Well, I saw the top of it, had no idea. And of course, he, went down in the hole.
Of course.
But did you get a picture of that?
I didn't.
From the backside.
We were over
Yeah.
here, and he was over there finding holes to climb
You
in.
need one to add to Carla's collection.
Well, we're sitting in the bus coming back. He's going, did y'all see these pictures? There's like 3 rows, and we're like, we had no idea it was there. There was a little Odeon theater, and we sang in there, and it was a neat little.
So the long story short is that John and Neal have taken up a new profession, and they are now tour directors with Royal Caribbean.
Well, we got everybody back in time before they closed the doors.
Yeah.
Well, it was an adventure, and that was the kind of
It
a
was.
off the cuff kind of thing that was happening.
Yeah.
That made it fun.
Yeah. And we stayed on the ship that day and recorded and had a nice, it was nice calm day. Hardly anybody was on the ship, so we enjoyed that. So that was Saturday, and then Sunday we worshiped together on the ship, and we had some visitors that joined us, and that was a good day. What do you, Hiram preached a fantastic lesson.
Yeah, first we invited some people that had actually been, had stopped by. We've been singing every night out on the deck of the ship, and near a walking track area where a few people go. It's a quiet place on the ship, and people have been coming by, and those that would stop, we would invite them. But the 4 people that came were those who were just sitting next to us in the dining room, remember? And so as we're inviting the waiter to come and to worship with us the next day, this guy gets up and he goes, I couldn't help but overhear you guys talking. Would it be okay if we joined y'all tomorrow? And we said, sure. And so next
He was
thing
a
we know.
missionary in Istanbul, Turkey, for 6 years.
Okay, I didn't know
the
that.
religious
Yeah.
group he was a part of.
Okay.
And then the other 2 that just we thought had come from the night before, they were just walking down the hallway during our worship service, as a part of where all the cabins are, and they heard us, and they decided just to come in, and that was how they.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that was Sunday morning. It was a great worship service, all of us. And we haven't had anybody really be sick. I've been so thankful for that. And,
Minor stuff.
yeah, minor things, but you hear about cruise ships and stomach issues, and I just haven't heard much of that. So thankfully, but that afternoon we went into, is it Bodrum or Bodrum? Bodrum, I think, right?
Bodrum, I think. Yeah.
Turkey, that place in Turkey. And what was the celebration going on with the Jets?
It's their
100 year of
autonomy of being a nation.
being their
The
nation.
current nation of Turkey.
Well, they made an announcement on the ship's intercom that morning, but I didn't hear it. But Pam Randall made sure that we knew. She said that if you hear jets at 2 p.m., that's why it's a celebration. And sure enough, I'm so glad that she said that, because we would have been a little nervous.
Low and loud.
Yeah.
Even knowing it the first time it flew over, it was starting.
So they'll start on.
Yeah, I got a little bit of video. Did y'all get any video of it? Yeah, so we might have to share that next week. And so that day, John and I and Brian and Shannon, we rented a kind of a small boat that took us out into the wherever we.
Harbor of the
but
bay,
but is that the Aegean or where
It's
we
part
are?
of the
The
Aegean,
Mediterranean,
right there,
Aegean.
Yeah, close to where it starts.
So they took us out to a couple of spots, and we got to see gorgeous water. And long story short on that, as we were coming back into the harbor, this little boat tootled up, and it was selling ice cream. It just pulled up next to us.
With an ice cream truck, it was an ice cream
Ice cream boat.
The only thing it was missing was the little songs that they play, from childhood. We didn't hear any of that, but it just made John's whole day. Delivery, ice cream, that was the best thing.
Ice cream is brought to you.
Yeah, but that was fun. It was a fun day, and y'all.
And you
spent-
got to get in the water, John, which, right, wasn't that
Was a
trip
bucket
also?
list for
You've
this
been
time.
wanting to.
Well, we're hoping to leave that out of this.
Oh,
You took your shoes off first.
Well, I did,
Okay.
and but I think that the fish all were scared away because we saw them.
Okay, moving right along. Next, we have.
We had the Lumen group with
Yeah.
us, and we walked over to the underwater archaeological museum. And that was neat.
That was very neat.
There was a Byzantine era ship that was discovered and had several tons weight. I was talking to Dean Murphy at some point. I can't remember the exact number, but they have extracted 5 tons of material. Most of it glass, but there were several intact jars and so forth. So it was neat to see. As we think about Acts 27 and the shipwreck that happened there, think about all the cargo that was thrown overboard. Yeah. Maybe at some point they'll pull that out, But to see things like that was neat.
The instructional pleasure,
No. I'm sure we had
carnal, spiritual.
Yeah, the truth comes out.
There's many other details that we.
Well, and I think we did mention last week that there's several days that are on our own. We don't have planned excursions, and that was one of the days that everyone could choose what they wanted to do. And so most people just headed into the town and did some.
Well, that was added to the list, remember, because we were initially supposed to go there. Supposed to go to Israel.
We were supposed to be in Nazareth on Sunday, and worship with the brethren there and take a boat, but we will not talk about that again, huh? Yeah. So Monday, then we went into Rhodes, which is Greece, and can y'all talk a little bit about what we saw there?
Well, from a biblical standpoint, it is referenced in the Old Testament. At least we can kind of patch some things together to that regard, but Acts 21:1, I think. It's just mentioned as a stop off. We have no idea how long Paul was there, and he continues on his journey. But it was certainly that would have been the return from the third missionary journey. So it's in the Bible, but we didn't really nowhere really for us to go and to see that part. You can speak to the other part.
Well, yeah, tradition says that he spent some time there preaching the gospel, and there is a presence of a couple of Byzantine churches and all that, but definitely a Roman site, and so just kind of gave us a feel of maybe again what Paul and other early Christians would have encountered when they went there to places like that, the paganism, the world of Rome, and the emperor worship, but that whole Acropolis up there, dedicated to Athena, believe it or not. There was a temple up there to her and to Apollo, and
Just very grand. I didn't expect that. On time.
And it supposedly
the view.
The view. Overlooking what they call St. Paul's Bay, but we don't know if he landed there at Lindos or if he landed at Rhodes itself, the city. But,
so that was Monday, and then on Tuesday that was yesterday. We were in Cyprus. That was yesterday, right?
It was.
Wow, days are running together. And what I kept thinking, and we talked about this, is how much it looked like Israel. It smelled like Israel, looked like Israel. The terrain was so much like Israel. But y'all talk about what we saw while we were there.
Well, that was one of the places that Paul stopped at on his first missionary tour, and Paul and Barnabas and John Mark, Acts chapters 13 and 14. And we got to actually go to Paphos and Paphos, I think, as some say, and heard a great lesson. Neal spoke at the little Odeon there. It was a 2nd century AD Odeon, but still gave you a sense of the idea of that area being a Roman, place, Roman city, and just really was nice to think about. Again, these early missionary tours that occurred in these areas. But the thing that was most exciting, I think you need to convey and tell about.
Well, so far as we know, and it's kind of hard sometimes to know what all the facts are, but there have not been New Testament Christians on the island of Cyprus for some time. And there was a young man from Uganda who's studying at Eastern Mediterranean College who has been searching for truth for about a year and a half, and reached out to Churches of Christ and a variety of brotherhood organizations, including World Video Bible School, played a part in getting Rod Selman and Victoria, his wife, over to essentially, they'd had some communication to baptize him, did a follow-up study with him and then a friend or roommate of, his name is Kith Nimbali, and so there's a Christian that we know of that's been baptized, and he's so thrilled, and he's growing. He worships online with the Lehman Avenue congregation. And we just found out before this trip that Wayne Parker, who's been a missionary for a long time in the South Pacific, that they're going over to Cyprus to begin work. So hopefully further establish the church on the island of Cyprus.
Was that in the works before they found out about Kith, or was that after?
You know, I need to ask him. I've been corresponding with him about another new convert that's in the Bowling Green area. But I wouldn't be surprised if this motivated him, because it's gotten the attention of a lot of folks in the Brotherhood with, and especially him being in, if I'm saying it right, Famagusta, which is kind of on the north of the UN buffer zone on the Turkish side, which I think the relations are fairly friendly between those two. But I'm not sure. Salamis, biblical Salamis, is just south of where the college is. And I think that's where Wayne is going.
Okay.
Well, and that was where Neal's lesson about the power of one and influence, and Barnabas being there and his work and coming from that island, and then just thinking about what all they were able to do just as a few small band of Christians, and then kind of the connection in between what just a few people who were online, watching, here's this gentleman watching the work that Brethren had put up and all the efforts of just one person here and there, but ultimately then, as you said, pointing us to the power of one. How did you say the power of one that leads us to, how can you remember? And then pointing us to the one is at the end. So
Well, I think it was neat. You made a point on the bus out there about how Barnabas and Paul go to Cyprus and they evangelize there, but there's the Acts 11 connection where you have some come into Cyprus teaching the Jews only, but you have some Christians coming from Cyprus, so the church has already been there, going to Antioch area, and they're also teaching to the Greeks. And that's been a neat thing about all of this. We're going back to the Bible lands where the church began in the thousands, as Luke gives us that chronicling going through, and it's really heartbreaking and on one level to see how sparse the church is throughout this region, and now we have the opportunity to go back and take the gospel where the gospel first went out from, so you think about Nazareth and some other places, and we sure need the church to go back to these places.
If this sounds familiar to some listening in today, it's because we talked about this on the podcast. Do you remember, Carla, back in the spring when we first heard about Kith and his story? And we shared it, and I believe even shared an address for him, because some of the ladies were wanting to know how they could reach him and send cards of encouragement. So this is the same gentleman that we're talking about when we visited Cyprus. That's where he's at. Right.
We're really hoping we could link up with him, but I didn't realize it's a bigger island, and it would have taken 2 or 3 hours to get over there.
And it was the other direction.
And
it's a little bit hard. You have to take your passport, and it's more involved. I don't know how hard it would be to come back to the Greek side once you've gone up there. And we had a very short days, you remember, in Cyprus yesterday.
I had no idea that there was Turkish Cyprus and Greek Cyprus, so that was something I learned yesterday, among other things.
Yeah, I asked Neal when we were first talking about it, because visiting the Greek islands has been on my bucket list for a long time, and I said, and now we're hitting how many? And I started naming them off, and he said, well, Cyprus you can't really say, right, is a Greek island, because it doesn't belong to either one, really.
Not solely Greek.
Is it a sovereign nation, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what I understand. I mean, there's a lot of controversy and still debate about it, but Greek and Turkish, so.
So you did Turkish islands and Greek islands.
2 for 1.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, well, it's been good, and I really wish we could have done what we originally had planned on doing, and we'll just have to do it again. And what the latest that's going on in Israel is, I think, maybe speak to that just a little bit, and then we have more stuff that we want to get to.
Did y'all bring the stopwatch?
We didn't even set a timer yet, did we?
I don't think so. We'll pay attention now.
You were going to talk about Israel.
Oh, I am?
Yeah.
Oh, well, what do you want to say about Israel?
Well, what's going on, and just, we've heard a
Well,
little
I mean,
bit from...
we're not, certainly not up to date on a lot of the news that's been happening, but I know that ground invasion has been, they're preparing for that and understand about the hostages that they're hoping to get those released, and maybe somehow using the ground invasion as a negotiation piece and all that. But it looks like that's what's going to happen. And there's a long history. We talked about it today with our group, just about the history of the whole Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and how things developed, and beginning with the Israeli state in 1949, and so it's a complicated, long process to discuss, and I'm not sure I could.
No, we don't really want to do the long, complicated, but I mean, we've talked to the Jadons in Nazareth, and
how are they doing?
I think they're okay. I mean, Inam said just a couple of days ago that they're worried. I mean, I've never heard her say that before. Usually it's just something that they're accustomed to with those rockets that come from Gaza, but this is much more involved, and lots of prayers, and just praying that.
Well, we did hear word back from the lady that we work with over there, who lives in a place called Suhadasa, which is just southwest of Jerusalem, and she was taking her grandson to a tennis lesson. So some semblance of normalcy seems to be emerging there, but they're all, I think, still on pins and needles about what's going to happen, and the world affairs, who's going to get involved in this, and what are the ramifications in terms of all these other nations that may join on, and join up sides, and what this thing might erupt into. But anyway,
I noticed the U.S. presence with like battleships, and they're staging all around to maybe keep some of the nations from going further.
Well, and I know this isn't a podcast to focus on the political aspects of all that, but I want to say that from my judgment and my perspective, you've got a very radical terrorist organization that's been in charge of Gaza, Hamas, and they've just been nothing but a thorn in the side of Israel, and it's just not right for terrorism and the acts of that they've committed against humanity, and the abuse of human rights and all of that. I mean, I'm not saying that anybody's perfect on any side of the whole issue, but there've been some terrible things that have been going on, and they've really kept the people of Gaza, I think, enslaved in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah. Well, many prayers for that situation. Okay. You have anything else on that?
No, I actually have a random thing I was going to say that has nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but in case you're curious, we're actually recording this in our cabin, Neal and my cabin. So that's the backdrop. The other day when we recorded, we were in a much louder place, so we were just trying to find somewhere quiet. So if you're curious about what you're looking at, that's what you're looking at. Yeah. And now we can talk about more serious things.
This is not our personal art.
That's right.
Yeah, interesting. We have an elephant. It's an elephant sitting on the beach staring at a ship that's sailing away, and I'm not real sure what the symbolism is, but it's interesting. Yeah. So what has been your favorite thing that you have eaten?
Okay. On ship or off ship?
Both.
So on ship, I'm going to say the creme brulee here. They've served it twice, and I've had it twice because it's the best I've ever had. Off ship was when we were in Bodrum. However you
in
say.
Turkey.
Our
in
second
Turkey.
Turkish stop.
And we stopped for breakfast, and it was a traditional Turkish breakfast kind of a thing, but it was a fried egg that came out and it's separately in a little silver pan, and then a big platter that was filled with about 3 different types of cheeses and walnuts and dried apricots and tomatoes and cucumbers.
That cheese stick thing.
There was it was almost like a big long fried cheese stick. It was rolled up in some sort of flaky dough, and then at the top was what was
honey
in
and butter, a kind of jam, some kind of
yeah, that's what it was. Preserves, and then olives, and then honey and butter, and then regular butter. And when they serve it to you, first of all, it's beautifully presented, but then they come to the table and they say, "Would you like olive oil on it?" And they drizzle it table side. So
about 50 pieces of bread.
And fresh squeezed orange juice, which tasted amazing. So that's been my favorite.
Yeah, and you got pictures of that, so you'll be
Yes,
able to share it
I
next week.
did. I took a lot of food, but
Mhm.
well, I don't know. We had salmon ravioli that was pretty incredible yesterday. But
Those two words don't go together to me.
oh,
What
it
do you
was
think?
amazing.
Smoked
It was
salmon?
smoked salmon inside of a really tender ravioli with this creamy sauce. It was
That was in that little lunch break we had
fantastic.
from
Yeah.
Cyprus.
Yesterday.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you,
How
Neil?
about- yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to say that the off-ship options were the same because I also ordered the same thing she did, and we shared the little meal yesterday, and I think that's right. On the ship, that little tart thing we had, the lemon thing.
Oh
and
yeah.
Also a dessert.
It was a
Sure
lemon
dessert.
tart where the meringue was about this thick. It was piled on so high.
There was like 46 dessert options every night.
Yeah.
I only get one. Some people don't.
Only get one at a time, maybe. I don't know. I mean, on a ship you can order whatever you want, as
Endlessly.
many as you
As
want.
many appetizers, as many entrees, as many desserts.
Sometimes
So
we
fun.
get each get our own appetizer and then share one. But sometimes you've ordered like 2 appetizers and no main dish.
Yeah, I'll skip the entree and
Mhm.
order 2 appetizers and 2 desserts. And
Yeah. One time we counted up how many desserts we'd had in a day, and it was
Yeah.
shocking.
On an unrelated note, what's
The weight limit on this couch.
Exactly.
We shall not talk about
there
that.
are weight limits in the elevator when you get in and off. And
And it dings.
Yeah,
I
I
have
think
been noticing the ship listing to one side.
Which side would that be? I think it's on, because we're on the other side of the ship. It's on the Pollard side, right?
well, I was
is.
gonna say, so I think toward the end of the cruise, you can fit fewer people in the elevator because we all weigh more. So-
Yeah, on the way up here, that's when the elevator, we had just gotten on, and then Brian and Shannon got on, and it said, the weight limit has been exceeded in this elevator. Please ask the last person to step off. Brian and Shannon were off in a shot. I mean, it wasn't them.
Oh,
It was.
no.
We've seen lots more people on those elevators than that time, but
Mhm.
it was
It's
a
like
little
a game of
embarrassing.
Tetris with much softer objects trying to.
Yeah. So what about you? What's your favorite that you've eaten?
I'll tell you, I'm not nearly as sophisticated as you guys, and that beautiful culinary description. It's like, wow.
It's not vegetables
That
for
should have
sure.
been on Royal Caribbean's, little app to entice people to go to that place. But
Listen,
anyway.
you talk about history and politics, and I'll talk about food, okay?
Well, man, that was really. So yeah, this tells you a little bit about myself, I guess. So when we came down,
They already all know about you
from the
anyway.
Acropolis at Rhodes,
Mhm.
and we told everybody, look, we're not going to eat for a while. So if you have time, grab something quick on the way down. Well, we saw this little shop. What was it? Is it
A gyro,
Gyro, yeah.
right?
Is that how you
Gyro?
say it?
I'm
G-Y-R-O.
not-
Gyro,
I don't know.
gyro, I think. it's
So
Say it.
anyway, it's like flatbread with some shawarma meat that was the chicken.
It's chicken.
Yeah, and they threw some French fries in there, and part of it was probably we were famished because we had hiked all the way up there and hiked all the way down, and we were hurrying, and I was like, wow, this thing is really good.
The fries were in the.
Yeah,
Yes.
the fries were in it, and I don't know, there are a few condiments inside as well, but yeah, and so we kind of, the other thing, and I feel really bad about this because I thought because we told everybody you've got to be back at the bus by noon, and the bus was way up on this hill. Okay, so down from the Acropolis, way back up on the hill, and I got to thinking, I hope everybody got the message because we kind of did that word of mouth. Remember, we're like, hey, everybody, just go tell everybody we're not going to eat for several hours, so just on the way down, if you want to grab a little snack, real quick, just get it. And I got to thinking after I got there, what if everybody didn't get the message? And I show up with this big thing, and I can't be late by showing
Walk
up and
up.
eating it. So we were like eating, cramming in, running up that hill and everything.
Yeah, it just felt so wrong having this cardio exercise going on while I'm shoving French
Yeah.
fries in my mouth at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
That was amazing, though. It was really
Well, I
good.
want to interject really quickly that we did not get a chance to grab a snack on that time. One of the members of our group was feeling lightheaded and not feeling very well, and we were kind of hanging back with her and taking care of things. And so when I got on the bus, everybody's noshing on all this stuff, and we knew it was going to be a few hours before we could eat, and I was starving. And I just stood up on the back of the bus and said, does anybody back here have snacks?
Did he
See,
want?
you were
We
one of those
had
I
all
was worried
kinds.
about.
We had all kinds. People were like, I've got a granola bar, and I've got this, and I've got trail mix. And well, later on, I didn't realize I had done this, but somebody told me that I pushed down Neal's head. That all they saw, he was wearing a ball cap, and all they saw was me pushing down on his head, standing up and going, does anybody have snacks back here?
They go,
First things
that's
first.
just pretty usual.
Yeah. Foodie, yeah. Well, so on ship, favorite?
Last night, I don't know the name of it, but that roast.
Oh, it was
Oh,
just roast
yeah.
beef and Yorkshire pudding.
Yeah, it was outstanding.
Which pudding was not,
It didn't look like a pudding
It
at all.
looked
It looked
like
like,
a
a
little-
popover.
and you picked it up and ate it. It was totally different than what I thought, yeah.
I was just very,
You
very
keep
pleasantly
using this
surprised.
word.
Don't think of me and what you think of me. Okay.
And you?
Ooh. Probably the off ship would be that chicken gyro because it was really good. It was like grilled, but it was. I mean,
We're
it's
easy
grilled.
to please, I can tell
Yeah.
you that.
Well, it's that shaved meat, and
Yeah.
so it was good white meat chicken.
Probably
and
because y'all miss Israel so much, and that sounds
shawarma,
like a
yeah.
very
shawarma type.
Israeli kind
But
of
I don't
lunch.
like shawarma in Israel very much. And I don't know, it was good.
Yeah.
And then on ship, there've been lots of good. That French onion soup is to die for, and they're having it again tonight. So you and I laugh because one of the first things we do in the morning is log on to the app and see what the menu is for dinner that night.
I'll
So
say
we're,
it to Neil. Do you want to hear tonight's menu?
we're
Well,
comparing.
What's weird about that for this trip? Because we've been on one other cruise before. Well, two others, but one other where
First
we
one
did a
doesn't
Bible, Bible Lands cruise in 2018, and we never went to the dining room. And we went one time, and they set us by somebody we really didn't know, and I just felt funny, and we just thought we
Yeah.
loved the setting of that last one where we could go up to the dining hall, not the dining hall.
Well, we went through the
kind of the
buffet
cafeteria
line, but
buffet.
there was an outdoor
Yeah.
seating area where we
Yeah.
could watch the sunset. And
So we really weren't looking forward to going to the dining room, and when we went,
Yeah.
it was pretty good.
Yeah.
So now every night we look forward to here. So it's kind of a neat setting,
Good.
and you're pampered.
Oh.
You're pampered.
Yes, our waiter's name is Ajit, and we were trying to figure out how we can get an Ajit back home because he just waits on us hand and foot and wants us to be happy and says, "Are you happy? Can I bring
How
you
can
something?"
I make you happy?
As if he doesn't
Was
believe
it-
us.
Was it delicious? Was it?
Yeah,
What
he
can we do
calls
better? What can we do
He
better?
brings you. Neil drinks like a camel. Do camels drink a lot?
tea.
And he will bring him out 3 glasses of tea at once.
They anticipate. what
Just
you
so he
better
doesn't have
do
to
like.
continually bring you
Yeah.
a fresh
I
glass.
guess I'm going to have to do that for him from now on.
I
Well,
think so.
John has agreed to call me Ma'am Carla from now on,
And Carla.
I don't
and
remember
ask me how can I make you happy every night at dinner,
that. Well,
right?
I do that all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Sir
No
Neil.
adjustment.
If you call him Sir John,
yeah. Well, we can try it. Let's
Sure
see how
try.
it works out.
Sounds very Crusader, doesn't it?
Ma'am Carla
We saw
doesn't sound
some-
Crusader.
Something about John and castles and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
It fits.
Which, by the way, that is one of the neatest things about
Mhm.
this trip. Also, just all the different history, right? We're seeing from
Different periods, different places.
do you get a sense they're stalling the personal questions that
I
we're
think
wanting
so,
to ask
yeah.
I
them?
think you're about out of time, aren't you?
No, we
Oh,
have
no.
plenty of
Hey,
time.
this is our podcast. We
Yeah.
can go for as long as we want.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of par for the course, right? Is what we hear.
Wouldn't know for sure.
Rude.
Y'all use a calendar to record the time.
Neil compared us to Roots and what was the other one? Gone with the
Gone with
Wind
the
one
Wind.
time, yeah. I think we've already covered that.
Right.
Moving right along. It's been fun, and
Yes.
we have had fun with y'all and just getting to know the other people on the cruise. That's the best part of the fellowship. Last night, the singing.
Oh,
That was amazing. And we've been meeting up on deck, 14 every night and singing as a group. And then we've had visitors and we had some,
12 or 15
Yeah.
last night from Canada
yeah,
to come join us.
we've enjoyed it. Okay, so you want to move into the good stuff now?
the nitty gritty.
Okay.
Now, this is where you say, cut to 40 minutes, right? This is where the real
That's
stuff
it.
starts.
If you're not interested in the
Yeah.
chit chat,
What I think Neil has referred to as blather before.
he comes up with his
I would
own
say that.
descriptive words.
Yeah.
Let's matriculate past the blue cheese and then tell me what we got going on.
Okay, moving right along.
Neil.
Was that a reference to my stinky blue cheese?
I don't, yeah.
You told him.
Yes.
I heard you. I'm glad. All right, so.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Are you
have
going to
time later.
explain? No,
No,
I already
I
did.
know.
I
No,
did.
no.
So it's not a big deal,
not a big
but
deal.
I had a
Wow,
grilled
Neil.
cheese right before we met up here,
Let's not
and
talk about it.
why is it boorish?
No, yeah, it's
Immature.
Boris and
Oh, we got John Moore to say Boris on the podcast.
And
unrefined.
No,
Immature.
immature.
No.
That's
Or
Foolish
immature.
and unrefined.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Well,
We've been
no,
saying it
immature
wrong.
is how you, anyway. So I had blue cheese on my sandwich, and it got on my finger, and I just said to Kathy that my fingers smell like blue cheese, and she said, "Ooh, that is not a good finger smell." So that's
Well,
what we're
it was
laughing
what
about.
happened after that.
What happened after that?
Uncontrollable laughter that
Oh.
went on for minutes. That was.
That's
why
such
I
a
thought
rare
I would
thing.
stick it in this episode. to
It's
see
just a rare
what
thing.
reaction.
That doesn't happen very often.
Neal.
Anyways,
Yeah.
So glad you're here.
We digress.
Again, we digress. Okay, so you're looking at my notes, and you're not supposed to be looking at my
I
notes.
wasn't. I was staring off into space.
That happens to be right here at my notes. But I mean, we're going to say good, wonderful things about you two, and I'm starting to rethink
I
that.
feel like we need to scrap that.
Yeah, let's just go
Go off
straight
the
to the
cuff.
hard
Yeah.
questions, right? No, we won't do that. But I was thinking, we were talking about this. We talk about how similar we are sometimes, but we also talk about how similar y'all are, and in a good way. You're
Really?
both looking nervous, yes. So I was just jotting down some things that I think are very similar about the two of you, and they are good. So I really am switching to serious. Y'all are both looking at me like I'm about to say something, completely serious here. But the number one, and I want you to jump in here too, the things that you noticed. Number one is that the two of you both love and honor God above all else and above all other people. That's your number one priority in life. And Kathy and I do often talk about how blessed we are to have husbands who honor God, and that makes all the difference in our marriage and in our families and in the churches that we are associated with. And so we're very
Thank you.
grateful and blessed by that. Both of you are preachers and teachers. I think that Neal, yours is more preaching and John's is more teaching, but I think even in that way, y'all, when you work together, you enhance each other because you both have those strengths. Both of you are easygoing and likable, and both of you are, I mean, y'all are blushing. This is kind of fun.
I think it's blood pressure. But
Yeah.
You're both family men. You're both lifelong learners. Both of you are constantly learning, going to school, wanting to go to school if you're not going to school. Both of you love history. Both of you are interested in people. What do you think, Kathy? Did I take all?
Well, the interested in people, the one that comes to my mind the most is how you both bring out the best in others. And I think that is such a people skill. And you, especially with group dynamics and all the different personalities, you keep everybody involved, you keep everybody encouraged, you give them something to look up to and live up to, and it's a real strength and a real talent that you both have.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you like to comment on all those compliments or no?
I mean, would we really be humble? Thank you. That's very kind. As you each know about us, we're far from perfect, and we know it. And so, appreciate that. Thank
Well, I am curious. One of my questions was how both of you could pretty much get along with anyone, and could you maybe speak a little bit to how you think? Do you consider yourselves pretty much able to get along with anyone, everyone?
I think I certainly, and I know Neal, I've seen him do this as well. It really is about just loving people because we're all made in the image of God, number one, and number two, every one of us has flaws. Every one of us has problems, and I've come to understand that over time. I mean, I used to get, I guess, early on in my life, and for many years thereafter, irritated about certain things, and I still do. We're all human. Sometimes you just kind of reach a level with people, and you go, okay, I just need some alone time, but I think more than anything, and these trips have taught us this, is that expectations or thoughts that we had about certain people, and then when you're with them, sure, after a while, again, we need a little alone time, but you realize there's not one single person that's perfect out there. And a trip like this will highlight some of those things that, we all have that are problems, but it also shows us, when I'm impatient or when, I get frustrated about things, and it just, like, if I'm this way, how can I expect everybody else to be perfect, So I need to be patient with others and just to love on people, because the Lord loves sinners. He loved Judas, Iscariot. And I think about if he loved someone like that, then I can love my brethren and must, So.
Yeah.
Well, I think in ministry and in mission work, you find out how people are the same no matter where you go on the earth. They have the same drives, same fears, same needs, and the more you spend time with them, the more you can come to understand what may be behind a surface interaction or response that seems more negative when you begin to get to know them better. And sometimes that's the hard part, is getting past if somebody's a porcupine, getting past all of that to see there's probably behind that a hurt or something that they need, and that God places these people in our path. Some years ago, I had a conversation with Alan Webster that was very helpful for me. And I know he didn't invent this. It was the first time I'd actually ever heard it. He said, hurt people hurt people. And the people that can be more obnoxious or harder to deal with, you'll probably find there's a hurt underneath there. And in that same conversation, he talked about an experience he'd had in which somebody kind of spewed on him, and then somebody came along and was commiserating and trying to get him to say something bad about that person. And he said, well, I'm just thankful. And it's in the packaging. There was no sarcasm. I was thankful that I was there to be the one that happened to. And those kinds of impressions, if we can keep those front of mind, help us with people who may be more difficult to deal with. And you can make it your challenge to, I'm gonna wear that person down. I'm gonna get past that barrier. And it doesn't always work, but it helps. The other way it's not gonna help if you try to meet antagonism with antagonism. So.
Yeah, I've seen you do that with make them your project. I don't know if you've ever worded it quite that way, but nurses, there was one particular nurse in the hospital that you had to she was not happy in her work.
No, she was an angry elf. But I decided, that I was.
You didn't call her an angry elf, did you?
Of course not. But,
not to her.
Yeah.
Well, so what?
But, I mean, to me, those are just, it's biblical. They're biblical principles of returning good for evil. It's what God has called us to do. We talk about that in our marriage seminars a lot, that the way you change lives, the way you make a difference, is not to return evil for evil, but to return good for evil. When Jesus was reviled, he reviled not again. When he was threatened, he threatened not, but he committed himself to him that judges righteously. And so when we do that, it works. It helps. I mean, there are situations where people just reject you and, are going to blow you off, as it were. But you know what? We've done our part. But and we don't do it for any, self-gratification in the sense of, look what I've done. It's a matter of, we want people to see Jesus, and if we trust in his plan and trust in the way he says to honor people and to do good to others, to love our enemies, to pray for them that despitefully use us and persecute us and say all manner of evil against us falsely. That's the Lord's plan, and it works. It works.
Well, I think there's an aggressive, maybe the wrong word, an aggressive side to this. That person can be an impediment to the success if we're talking about the local work, or even not that we had the experience on this trip, but sometimes you have those dynamics to where you're trying to break that down for the good of everybody else. And so you try to use the biblical principles that will help to short circuit what could really change the mood and the objectives that you have for the success of whatever it is you're doing. If it's a work in the local work, or if it's a day on an excursion. So.
Yeah.
Well, how do you handle it when there's somebody that just rubs you the wrong way?
Kill them with kindness.
I don't know if there's one answer to that.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that depends on the temperament and the personality of the other person. I have found sometimes it's better to, not in a rude way, but to ignore or to set boundaries so that they can't use ugliness to get their way, or to be bullyish or overly aggressive. Others, I think we can love it out of them. And sometimes you get it wrong. You try one and they need the other, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, because I just think, sometimes there are people that just personally rub you the wrong way, and then there's people that just do that to everyone, but I think that's kind of what you're talking about with the hurt people do hurt people, that maybe something's behind it. You jump in there. I feel like I'm dominating.
Oh, I'm just amused because I've been listening to these guys answer your questions, and like scripture just flows from their lips, well, just like it says in verse blah 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 blah. And when we do it, we're going, what's that verse? Where?
How's it go? Yeah.
What's that verse? I think somewhere in. So they're the pros, but I also thought about, I think it's the Jane Austen movie Emma, where personality is brought onto the scene that Emma, of course, doesn't like. She rubs her the wrong way. And she says, there's only one thing to do. I must throw her a party. And, it kind of goes back to your joking answer of killing him with kindness, but that becomes almost a spiritual growth opportunity or a challenge to, I know that I'm responding unfavorably to this type of personality, but I can go out of my way to be extra cheerful or friendly or warm around them. And either something good will come from that, which might be a great friendship, or at least I can walk away not regretting how I treated them.
There was
maybe what God's trying to do in you.
Right.
Not so much
Right.
And being aware of that, that there is a lot of things lacking in me. That's a good point. But I know we've talked about this before, but when you spend time with someone that you don't like a whole lot, you end up almost always coming away liking them more than you did before. That's happened several times. And maybe not someone that we disliked, but just kind of just didn't really want to be around.
Yeah. Well, and being careful about presuppositions or judgments about people early on. And if anything that we've learned on these trips and dealing with people, it's been that. And I know in the church as well, somebody comes in and they're a new person, and you may form this opinion of them, and we got to be careful about that, because like you said, there may be some things down deep that are going on, or we're not seeing them in their total context. But we've had emails and information. There's certain personality types out there that need to know a lot of things, or kind of a little pushy maybe, or whatever. And just corresponding with them, we think, oh, what's this going to be like when we get on this trip and be with this person? But it's been fascinating to me to see that every time that we got on these trips, and those people that we were worried about are people that we fell in love with, and so you just never know what blessings God has in store for you if you just are patient and willing to forgive, and not even, it wasn't so much about forgiveness as it was just not judging ahead of time or discounting someone in some way, and because they love the Lord, and these people are coming on these trips, they love the Lord. That's a part of why they're here, and you already have that in common, so you need to cultivate that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, something I know that you are good at, and I don't know this about you because I don't know people situations that y'all have encountered, but people that have mistreated you, and you're able to, whether it's in words or attitudes or things that you've found out that they've said to other people about you, and you treat them with kindness. And I have such a hard time with that. I may not treat them unkindly, but I avoid them, and you don't do that. You'll go out of your way to greet them, and I don't know if that's just what you're thinking.
Well, not all the time. I mean, I appreciate you saying that, but there are times when I think this is what we all need to remember about ourselves, is that sometimes physiologically we're just tired. We don't feel well. We all have maybe a point in which we just kind of have a breaking point in dealing with situations. And I found out on this trip a few times, not with any of our passengers that are in our group, but just people of the world or whatever. And just because I'm tired and I wasn't in the best frame of mind to receive it, and I didn't respond in the way that I wanted to. So we're all human. We make mistakes. And
I think one thing I love about you both, even in light of relationships and people, is you both naturally keep the main thing. And if we were to use an example like this cruise that we've been on, there are things that happen that maybe test our patience or make us tired, or there might be inconveniences here and there. Things are bound to happen on any trip, and you both seem to have this knack of here's a golden opportunity to invite these people in and have them sing with us. Here's a golden opportunity to invite them to join us in our worship service on Sunday morning. Here's a teaching opportunity. And I always feel like I'm reeled back in. You know, I might be sitting there thinking, oh man, I can't believe blah, 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 blah. And you guys have such a natural knack for seeing the big picture and remember what this is all about. Mm-hmm. It's not about those little things that should fall in order or be convenient. The big picture is we're learning more about God's world and His people and the land of the Bible and the opportunities that have opened because of it. And I always feel like when you do that, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's why we're here. Yeah. That's right, that's what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that. It's that literal living, keep looking up, you know, kind of influence that you wield.
Yeah.
Well, you said that. Here's something that I learned on this trip that I feel like I don't want to not inconvenience somebody, but I guess just make someone else feel uncomfortable unintentionally. The singings, for example, when we first talked about getting together, finding a place in the boat, because we had places reserved during the day, but not at night. They couldn't provide for us a place at night, so we were looking for a place where we could gather and just kind of talk and, you know, have some quietness. And we thought, well, is it going to seem strange to people that we start singing? Are they going to be bothered by that? And I was a little worried that people are going to go, why are they doing that? They're infringing on our privacy up here. And you know, I mean, I probably wouldn't be too excited if, you know, the Muslim prayer call, you know, erupted or something while we're outside. So, you know, I kind of think from that perspective. And but yet, when we all started getting together, here's how God blesses you and how you realize that there are other people that appreciate those kinds of things, as long as you're not offensive and, you know, and being rude about it. But we were in a private kind of area on the ship, and they could have walked on by us, and they did. But I was amazed to think about how many people stopped.
Mm-hmm. Little kids taking video, teenagers taking video.
Yeah, little kids
stopping and
they were
participating.
It was neat. It was really neat. And then more and more, and the singing has just been absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. So it's been a joy to see people who are willing to publicly share their faith like that in that kind of setting.
An unashamed demonstration. Yeah. I don't see any showiness. And, you know, I couldn't read a heart anyway. But I think it's people who are there's the strength in our group that we feel from one another and doing this together unashamedly, and it's faith affirming to see other people who share that and appreciate it. If there's been a negative thing, they've kept it to themselves. It seems to be very positive. Yeah. And that's an aside from everything else. It's just a side benefit. It seems.
Yeah. One other question that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on is another similarity that both of you share, that both of you stand for truth without coming across as harsh or combative, or I don't know what words to use, but both of you share that blessing that I think is a talent too. And do you see that? Do you understand what I'm saying, and how do you think you are able to do that? Either one of you.
Well, I'll just say that a big influence, a mentor in my young preaching life, and I think we're the product of that. My first mentor was my dad. My dad preached almost 60 years full time, and he's of such high character. I appreciate from him seeing a consistency, but also a humility. He's been a learner. You know, his next birthday will be 80, and he never just acts like he's got everything figured out. But my next mentor was Wendell Winkler. Mm-hmm. And Wendell Winkler, at least in the time of life that I knew him, was big in talking about, you know, the sound doctrine for daily living. Mm-hmm. He emphasized balance and how important it was to speak the truth in love, and don't let either one of those overshadow or eclipse or substitute for the other. And watching him do that in some very difficult situations, knowing some of his personal circumstances and what he went through, some of that I learned later in life, and how he would preach those, and he would tell us, there are difficult subjects that you've got to preach that will not be popular. You may be standing alone, but he says, if you're not kind, you're the wrong kind. You can be
Mm-hmm.
right and be wrong. A lot of things like that when you're training to preach, it really makes an impression on you. And so, not that I've done that like I should, but I always heard his voice a lot, and that
Mm-hmm.
particular emphasis, because that was a big one of his.
That's you, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably there were some that influenced me early on to think that anytime something false was said by anybody, that you had to immediately correct it or you weren't standing for the truth. And so, someone calls you a pastor, for example, well, but if you don't right then say, oh, listen, I'm not a pastor, I'm a preacher or whatever, and so forth. And yet this person may not have known us from Adam. And but I was sort of made to feel that way, not by my parents or or your father like that, but maybe it was a false impression. But there is almost, I felt like, that sort of paradigm that you have to operate out if you're going to be a quote a faithful Christian in the eyes of some. Then I began to realize that I was expecting people to understand something. They didn't have a framework to even begin to understand it. They just saw you as being or argumentative, or or just
Obtuse.
obtuse, instead of developing a relationship with people that then they would listen to you, and I think sometimes it's like we can't expect non-Christian people to act in a Christian way, and for us to just jump all over them about something by the way that they're doing wrong. I think it's problematic. Now that's different from me saying if I'm asked what I believe, or if I have an opportunity to stand for what's right and I can do it and I speak the truth in love, then I must do it. That balance is, I realize is challenging, and always knowing, how to let your speech be always with grace seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. So answering every man doesn't mean that I always need to say something right away, because Jesus didn't always say something right away when someone was doing something that, he asked questions, or he listened, and looked for the right opportunity. But that may not be exactly what you're asking about, I guess. But I know one thing, that talking about your dad, my dad, I felt like he wasn't a preacher, but
He was
he loved people
in a different way.
and he had, I think, a greater influence on the non-Christian, more so than I ever have had as a preacher, because he connected with people and he was interested in them. Whereas I thought that if I didn't right away, talk to them about, their relationship with God, that I wasn't, again, being faithful. Whereas he was friendly with people, and maybe that says more about me and what I thought and what I shouldn't have been thinking about stuff, and as opposed to, I don't know, I just really appreciated his example about just enjoying being with people and talking to them or whatever, and then letting his good works shine, and then as the opportunity presented itself, then to talk to them about Jesus. And
Well, you're both relationship builders. You remember people and situations. I know you can remember names that I could not imagine.
It's getting harder.
Yeah, and you ask people about themselves. One of your immediate questions to everyone is, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Even in situations when I think you probably shouldn't. Like, police officers in airports and things, they don't really need to tell you where they're from. They might always think, they're going to think he's stalking them, or, but anyway, yeah, I just think you're both
I
that
want
way.
to say just a little something about, there's two fronts, I think, in this, and maybe they're not exactly the same. In local work, one of the ways that you can achieve that balance is by being there for people, whether it's opening your office for counseling, or being there when they're going through the hurts, when the births and the deaths and the crises that come along. And as you take that approach to ministry, then they'll know when you preach on Matthew 19:9 or Colossians 3:16 or any number of examples we could give. They know that you care and that you have their interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
On the brotherhood level, I've learned that to be measured to be working on being an encourager, and building relationships, but realize you don't always have to answer your critics, and you certainly don't respond in kind when they're not kind, because again, I feel like I quote Brother Winkler a lot, but in Luke 7:36, wisdom is justified of her children. I know that's not exactly the context there, but this whole idea that there are people on the sidelines watching between you and somebody else, and if they're ugly and you try to respond like Christ, the discerning people, or ultimately they're going to know, hopefully, and you try to live with the right kind of character, they'll be able to see the difference, hopefully.
Yeah.
And if not, the Lord will sort that out ultimately.
Do you have anything? I'm going to go on to the next question unless you...
You can go on to the next question.
Well, what I really wanted to kind of focus in on, I know we probably have
There are
already...
22 questions on here.
I see you're going to go long, and we're going to be on here, and you're going to blame us. You're going to say you're no better.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
8 o'clock already? Awesome.
This, I think, is something else that you both have excelled at, and that is at being fathers. And you're both the fathers of 3 sons, which means we're the mothers of 3 sons. You both have the respect of all 3 of your sons. I think it would be great to hear. I have several different questions, and I think you do too, Kathy, or you'll come up and have some. What do you consider the most important aspect of fatherhood, as far as obviously raising them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, but how, practically speaking, what do you think are some things, if you could speak to young fathers today, what would you tell them is a very important aspect of fatherhood?
Well, first of all, I'll be the first to admit that I'm far from what I needed to be and should be even now as a father, and I guess I look back with a lot of regrets and wish that I would have done things differently here and there, and maybe not been as hard in some areas, but harder in others, none of us, grow into perfect fatherhood to begin with. We're going to make some mistakes, and we're grateful for the grace of God, but what I think makes the changes, because every father makes those mistakes, but what the difference is to show unconditional love to your children, always, that you shower them with a lot of affection, and that give them a sense of self-esteem, that they are important, and that you're willing to listen. And part of, I think, how we do that is to encourage, to listen, to when they're doing certain things, we compliment them, and we don't try to compare them to anybody else, and we look at their particular skills and their personality and celebrate those things that they're good at. I think and being willing to say that I was wrong and I'm sorry, and I don't know, I just think love covers a multitude of sins, and again, I may be taking that a little out of context there, but the point is that if our children know that they are loved and valued, it will cover over a lot of mistakes that we make. Because we all need to be affirmed. We all need to know that we're important and valued.
I would say a lot of the same things. I remember it was hard for me to I don't know if y'all ever had this moment, but when I went off to college, I was a youth minister in Bayonet, Alabama. I remember it was on a Saturday afternoon. I picked up the phone, with the rotary dial and did all that. And I called my parents, and I proceeded to confess to about 2 or 3 pretty big things. And I never have asked them after the fact. I know, at least in my mind, I'd gotten away with this and they didn't know it. But they acted so unsurprised and loving and encouraging. And I remembered that. I hadn't even met Kathy yet. And I remember the boys had some big moments in life where I know it had to be very hard for them to own up to that. And it made a big difference. And I think we're afraid of what's going to happen when we're kids growing up. And when we find empathy, understanding, and I think that makes a big difference, and it builds a relationship. And that unconditional love, that's what made me think, because we're all sinners who are going to make some huge mistakes along the way, sins, and we need that. And I think all I would add to that is there's no substitute for time. You know, the whole quality versus quantity time. And I'm like John, I feel like there's a lot of things I should have done and I need to do better than I have, but I enjoyed having the opportunity several times when they were growing up to take them with me on gospel meetings, mission trips, and just experiencing that together and having time in the evening. And Kathy's always encouraged me to continue to grow as a dad, and I appreciated the spurring on that she did. And I don't know, as a result of some conversation we had, came up with the idea of going and praying with the boys every night. It seemed like a little thing. I didn't even know if they cared about it, but they've talked about that looking back. But at the end of their day, in that way, me asking them, what's going on? What can we pray about? So being sure to admit your imperfection and your need for growth and letting them know that you don't think you've got it figured out helps them, I think. And now y'all, three of your guys are on the other side of this, and two of ours are as dads, and I guess that's how I would answer it.
Something I wouldn't have known how to identify it in terms of the terminology, but I've since learned that my dad was this, what I'm going to share with you, and that is the difference between being the authority in your home and authoritarianism. We are to be the leaders, and we are indeed the ones that set the rules, and we, working together as husband and wife, and there doesn't need to be any question, in our children's minds about who rules that home, because I've seen too many situations where there were children who ruled their parents, right? Yeah. All right, so I think parents who are desirous to be in control, they want their children to live right and to do right, are the authority. But they get over into what some call authoritarianism, where people are judgmental, they're harsh, they're critical, they don't see the heart of the child, they only see the mistakes they make, and they're very punitive in their nature, as opposed to encouraging and reinforcing. So when I saw that terminology used in a book that I can't even think of the title of right now, but the difference between authority and authoritarianism, and I shared that with some families one time, and the dad said, well, he just turned the mirror on, so he started crying. He said, that's me. That was me. He wanted his children so much to be perfect, and he thought, this is what I got to do. I got to correct this and correct that and correct that, and I can't overlook it wrong, because then they're going to grow up thinking that this is wrong, and so forth. And they were always on them about everything, and what they did was they rebelled. And so we've always said, and I got this from a book I read, written by Josh McDowell years ago, that rules without relationship equals rebellion. And if we don't have a relationship and love and patience and all that, and all we have is rules, they're going to rebel. And so I think that's probably my biggest advice. And I saw in my dad, I knew my dad when he pointed his finger, I knew. Okay. But I knew that's not all he did. He loved me. He told me how much he, was proud of me, and encouraged me in the things that I was good at, and he talked to me. He tried, and so I wanted to follow him because I knew how much he loved me.
Mm-hmm. Something that occurs to me, the longer I live, I see passivity in fathers and mothers too, but I don't see that in either of you. I know when the boys would get out when you take them to school, you told them every day to be a leader. And you've shown them how to lead, but you can't really be a passive leader. So I don't know if you can speak any to that as far as avoiding passivity in parenthood, but I just think that's a huge thing. And I see it in fathers, husbands who aren't leaders. And maybe there's things that we do I'm sure there are at times that make it hard to lead, but maybe speak a little bit to passivity. It may not be something you've thought of before, but I see it.
Well, I don't think that's an option, and I think I don't guess, yeah, you're right. I never thought of it in terms of that. I think I'm grateful for the fact that I had a dad who was a hard worker in the work he did, but he was engaged, he was present, and there was no mistaking who was the leader in our home. And I mean, you can't help but to see from that. I feel like you learn good and bad from your parents, but and we just tried to maintain a close family, and it's a partnership, and the encouragement of a godly wife goes a long way in that, and I feel like I've been blessed in that way. So
it's funny how people use terminology today that we probably wouldn't have used when we were kids. Not that it was wrong, but I'm hearing a lot today the word intentional among those who are teaching and parenting, and we probably would have used the word purpose. Find a purpose in everything that we're doing. And I think that, talking about passivity, we can just as parents think, oh, okay, I need to go tell them do this and do that, and we don't really plan. We don't think about activities that are going to reinforce life skills, or maybe how to get along with people. And so one of the things, looking back on our parenting days, we thought about, okay, let's plant a garden, let's go on a camping trip, let's have an outdoor Saturday work project, even though sure there was value that came from not having some help raking up the leaves and all that, but I also knew this is a thing that builds cohesion in a family when you work on a project together. And so again, not regimenting where everything is nothing but rules all day, and you've got them doing this, and 2 o'clock it's this and this and this. But on the other hand, there's the extreme of, like you're saying, where their parents are all involved in their own work and their own lives, and their kids are kind of an afterthought. And it can't be that way. We have to plan. We have to be purposeful. We have to think about what's going to help educate them and mold them, most importantly, spiritually. But then, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That takes thought. That takes planning.
Yeah. Well, and we learned as young parents, I'm really drawing a blank on who I heard it from, but bringing God into everything, making connections. I think back to the Shema, Deuteronomy 6, and how does that play out practically in the activities that you're involved in, the places that you go. A couple of things that we gave some forethought to, intentionality, was when the boys started getting to a certain age. We thought if you want them to be baseball or football players, where do you take them? To the ball field. And when the opportunity came up to go to Bear Valley, if we wanted them to consider that, what better way than to put them around Bible teachers and students and have that be an impression that could be made on them all along the way, and show them there's no greater life than serving the Lord full time. And then in taking them to something we talk about a lot with the boys is we're going to take them to hospital visits and finding your happy place, because you go up to a patient and they go with me, and I'm thinking this one new convert in Virginia, and he hopefully this isn't too graphic for your listeners, but he had an abscess. And every time we went up, he'd go, "I want you to see how it is today," And it's kind of like you've got to, but to have them with me, and sometimes it doesn't smell great. Sometimes you're going to come up, see people in different. So they talk about that, but making God a part of each and every day, and then making them a part of that. Is this something you hope? I think it just kind of it becomes instilled.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me how both of you talk about your dads, and you learned a lot, and you patterned yourself, maybe unintentionally. Although I see a lot of your dad in you, and you, even since he's been gone, even more. So just thinking about when you have a good dad, you become a good. I know it's not 100% always the same.
It's a blessing.
Yeah,
huge.
but what a blessing to have a good father to learn how to be a father and to see the Father. You know, I always think about that, how so many kids' impressions of God come from who their earthly father is.
Well, what Neal said, I do see that as being highly important for parents, for fathers to provide rewarding experiences for their kids spiritually like that. Because even though, you know, no kid, and I'm thinking about, when you were telling the story, I was thinking about one of our boys that did not want to go with me to see a certain sister who was 90 some odd years old. You know, he was tired, he just got out of football practice, and he did not want to go. And, but
Yeah, that was one of the best things that ever happened to him. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I made him go. You know, he didn't say a word all the way there. He was, you know, he was protesting in his own way, and we got there, and we prayed with that lady, and we came outside, and he broke down and cried, and just it was a life changer for him, you know, because I insisted that he go, and the rewarding experience of that whole ministry moment changed him in a lot of ways. So anyway.
Yep. Good stuff. You have anything you want to add?
I can't talk now.
Sorry. Well, okay, here's another question for you in that regard then. How can mothers support, wives, mothers, support fathers in training their sons and daughters, not just sons, but daughters? What is it that we do, which might not be a fun thing for y'all to talk about? We can step out of the room and y'all can talk about it. What are things that we do as moms? And I can remember some things that you would say to me, that, you know, what might we do or say that would not help the situation, I guess. Put y'all in a bad position here, sorry.
Well,
Please don't use personal examples.
no, I was just going to say, I think not so, you know, you're not just talking about discipline or spiritual training. It's just the wide gamut. And of course, we're both going to be partial because we only have boys. So there's a whole another facet that's missing from this. But God knew it took a father and a mother to make a home. And so I think we balance each other out. And sometimes we do that imperfectly. We don't, as men, don't lead spiritually like we should. You know, wives can struggle with trusting, you know, the leadership and decisions that are made. Mm-hmm. You know, one will think more firm is the way to go, and one's more nurturing the way. They need all of that. Now, it's obviously helpful, and Kathy's always been great about this because I've made some bonehead decisions, or responses in moments, maybe is a better way to put it. And she was good about not letting that be known, typically, in front of them. And then we could go back and we could regroup.
Regroup.
And sometimes, you know, and really I think it's the wisdom of God. Sometimes I had it all wrong. Probably that was the more often. And sometimes she did. And time has proven that. But they needed both of that. They needed a mom who would soften and moderate, you know, and they needed a dad that would prod them and push them, and we needed each other to kind of step up in the areas where maybe we were lacking. And so I just don't know. It's just the wisdom of God. Sometimes people don't have that situation where they not even of their own choosing, where there can be a mom and a dad in the home doing this. But I just don't. It's harder for me to critique what Kathy might have needed to do better, because I'm so full of a sense of how I would like to go back and do some things differently. But God uses us together when both of our aims is to please Him first. Mm-hmm. He uses our temperament. I'm an extrovert, she's an introvert. Uses male, female, uses all of that, our different backgrounds, to help and shape and mold them. Hopefully, that combines to train them in the direction that they're bent toward.
Yeah. So. Yeah. What did I do wrong?
What did you do wrong?
Think carefully.
I just can't think of anything.
There's
That's-
nothing.
I was just sitting there thinking about all the things you did right.
Good
Just
answer.
deny.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
No. All right. So move to a little bit of a different topic here, and I just am curious if you could think of one piece of advice that you might pass along to a young man in his Christian walk. How would you advise them? What's a good piece of advice that you would like to pass along to a young man who's beginning his Christian life?
I guess I would say, first and foremost, come to know Jesus and really who he is, because I think, just like what John said about that, if you love me, keep my commandments. Well, if we come to know the Lord, it's going to be easier to keep his commandments. And what John also went on to say about we love because he first loved us. And so if we can help people to see more of who Jesus is and to see help a young person or our son, whoever it is, to focus their life on getting to know the Lord and cultivating that relationship, then so much of what they do and what follows in life is just going to be much easier for them. They'll be much happier and they'll be much more motivated to want to serve the Lord. So get to know Jesus. I think that's what we ought to encourage our kids to do and what everybody ought to be doing.
Okay. All right, Neal, what do you think?
I mean, I think that's great. Now, it's hard to improve on it. I guess I would add to it, everything costs. You know, you think about what your goals are and what you're trying to pursue. I believe God's made us so that whatever it is we direct our energy toward, we're going to succeed in that. I mean, the book of Ecclesiastes is full of admonitions about, you know, you can go down this road but what's going to be at the end of that? You may gain something, but what have you lost? And again, that's the purpose question that he finally understands at the end of the book. When it comes to a young dad, if I'm understanding your question right, and a young father, you can pour all your energy and your heart into your work, and you're going to succeed in that, but it will come at a cost. You can devote yourself to trying to give quality time to your family and investment there, and it'll cost you in some ways. You know, you think about all the decisions we make and how there is a cost, but what are we willing to pay looking back on?
Yeah.
If we can try to have the wisdom and maybe have some mentors that can help us at the end of that, invest in the right way, pay the right costs to get the kind of result that you want.
Okay. What do you love the most about him?
About Neal?
Mm-hmm.
You weren't supposed to ask me questions. Surprise. His genuineness. I've always said that pretty much what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not perfect, and he's humble about that, but he's perfect for me. And he's when we've been talking all this stuff about him being a people person, that's just who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And behind closed doors, and he really does love people, and that's what I love most about him.
Yeah, and you've helped him with that. Yeah. All right, so describe your perfect day.
Describe my perfect day.
Yeah, if you could have a day to do whatever you want to do, how would you spend it?
I think it's your turn to go first.
It starts, continues, and ends with you. But I'm sure John feels the same way.
Oh, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Ditto.
Oh, whatever.
We're in there somewhere, but
Yeah.
No, describe your perfect day.
I could describe his perfect day.
Uh-huh.
He just doesn't want to say.
No, I don't know. I'm not sure what all elements go there. I mean, that's the fun thing about life is that there's so many fun different ways that you can.
Boo, Neal.
I was not expecting
Try
that.
again. Try again.
I think my first answer holds.
Oh.
So I mean, seriously, let me say this: on this trip, one of the things I was looking forward to was 18 days, you know, away from some of the other responsibilities for a while, and to be with Kathy. And I know her love language is quality time, and my love language is making Kathy happy. So.
Good one.
The
but
sincerity.
Really,
Oh,
no,
just-
seriously. So there've
Yeah.
been, especially a few days where we've just had a lot of good time. Sometimes in the busyness of life, we don't get to talk together. But in those elements, you know, if I could have a run, see some mountains, and the Georgia Bulldogs beat the Texas Longhorns, you know, 35 to
Ooh,
nothing.
ouch.
Ice did.
When did
And
that
there's
happen?
coffee.
When did that happen? Oh,
Last time it didn't happen. And there's coffee, you know,
Mhm.
pretty, and gelato.
Okay.
And of course, all kind of spiritual things.
Because we know you, we know that's true, but that was a little bit funny. Yeah, so.
Sorry.
All right, what's your perfect day? It doesn't have to. You don't have to say
Well,
anything that you think I want to hear.
No, I appreciate that, but there's a part of me that likes, as you know, routine and normalcy. And when things are not routine, I get kind of, you know, down or frustrated or whatever, and I look for that. But then there's that part of me that loves to do what we get to do, and that is to go on trips like this, and that's certainly out of the norm. I mean, there's nothing normal about our life in the last several years, I guess. And
Except abnormality.
So the perfect day, I guess, for me is to be able to hold your hand all day long. No, see, that was the perfect day really is, for me, about family, and it's about learning. If I can learn something that day and study, and especially something about, you know, biblical history and Roman history and all that, you know.
Probably involves a map or two.
What was that?
And a hole.
Probably involves a
And a
map
hole.
or
You
two.
know, a map or two, you know. You know, there's just so many things. Who was it that was earlier talking about? Was it Hiram on the trip about, you know, from 1 Peter about seeing good days and, you know, and good life, and that we can. God wants us to enjoy this life, and there's so many things that, to me, a good meal, a wonderful time, you know, just enjoying God's creation, being with you. Carla worries about that if anything ever happens to her, you know, what's going to happen to me, because I'm so dependent upon her and for everything. And so, you know, I really genuinely would say that perfect day is to be with you every day.
Oh. Well, what I think your perfect day would involve, let's see, a hole with you in it, with some digging tools, and you've got a book open on the other side, you know, that's talking about some kind of Roman history, and you're excavating something out of Roman soil, and maybe there's a UT game on in the background, and all of your kids and grandkids are right around, and they're digging right around alongside you. There's food involved.
Oh, that day with
ice cream.
Jackson and I out there digging in the dirt, and just, you know, we were just digging rocks. I mean, that was just absolutely the best.
Yep. Simple stuff.
Yeah.
That's the best. Well, this has been fun.
Well, I have a couple of things.
Okay.
You have to answer the same question that you posed to me, is what's your favorite thing about John?
Well, it's funny because when you were saying that about Neal, I thought, because he is genuine, and I mean, it's not always what you see is what you get, I think, because there are always undercurrents, you know, that I know you know about Neal, what's going on underneath, and that they might be struggling to have the best attitude because they're human, and I know he's human, but he does love people, and always wants to do the right thing, and that includes with me. You know, sometimes things aren't always perfect between us, but I don't ever worry. I mean, I trust him wholeheartedly, and I know you do, Neal, as well. So there's too many things to choose one.
All right. Well, the other thing is, John, I really like your shoes.
Those are pretty sweet.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know where I got them. Thanks.
Did you thrift those?
I did. They were brand
Well,
new.
did she tell you the story
No.
about, well,
Well, how about ugly shoes?
so, when I
can't
was
see 'em on
walking in
camera anyway.
polishing the pulpit, and I walk in the door, and this woman says, "Hey, are you John Moore, right? Carla Moore's husband?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I just love the podcast that she and Kathy do together, and so forth, so on." I go, "Yeah, it's kind of interesting." And I said, "But the only drawback is that people know a lot of things about our personal lives, you know, and stuff." She goes, "Yeah, I know those shoes you got." And these are the ones.
Yeah.
It's kind of
So
unsettling.
we might get a little personal, but it's fun.
It is, and this has been fun. Thank you both for joining us and for being willing to come on our show. We knew that you would have what?
Before you start the ending,
The finger.
I do want to say, and I know y'all probably gonna like most of
Am
the
I gonna
end
have to
here,
get a pinch going here?
Don't pinch me. Don't pinch me.
I'm ready to pinch.
No, but the amount of good that y'all are doing with
Amen.
this, the people you're reaching, and the things that we constantly hear about, the encouragement that you provide. I know that you don't like for me to talk about it, but we kind of take a little pride in that, knowing that our wives are
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, we are very
Very
proud
much.
of you, and but we know that it's not, anything about what's the word I'm looking for? I guess ingratiating yourself. It's
Self-aggrandizing.
it's that y'all are really genuinely wanting to reach people, and you are, and just to encourage them. And so the amount of women that we encounter and seeing, tell us, oh man, we love this, whatever. And when there's so much bad that's going on in the world, you are doing a lot of good and truly helping people to look up. So.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very sweet. Thank you. And as I was saying, we knew you guys would have good things to share and things that our listeners would enjoy and appreciate. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up unless any of you have anything else you would like to add before we close out. All right. Thank you so much for listening in. And as always, if you have anything that you would like to share with us, or questions or comments or suggestions, we invite you to join us at the Looking Up page on Facebook, and also be looking for pictures and things that we'll be sharing from this episode. And Carla, until next time,
Keep looking up.
keep looking up. Love you.
Love you too.
Love you guys.
Love you.
Thank you.
Love, love, love.
All right.